Our story begins with an informal sit-down after another rogue training exercise. Han Solo was brought into a briefing with the commander of the Academy. He was frustrated. Lieutenant Kazi had seen many great pilots come into his facility and leave to become successful fighters for the Empire, but he had never seen someone with so much talent throw it away for the sake of free thinking. It wasn't common for recruits from Corellia to be so hard-headed. Many of those cadets came to these academies with the hope of making their people proud, of getting away from the slums of their society. If he wasn't inside the Imperial Academy, Han would be knocking off spice dealers or working on the docks on another freighter model that'd make a cajillion credits that he'd never see a penny of. Han Solo was a pilot inside the Imperial Navy, someone who was just one more trial run away from seeing open space. Now, Lieutenant Kazi quite liked Solo, despite his demeanor towards the Empire and authority as a whole. Kazi was one of those teachers that thought extremely highly of underperforming students. He saw the gift, the touch for the throttle, and masterful control over the TIE fighter. These weren't easy vessels to manipulate, and Solo did so with elegance, unlike anything Kazi had seen since the Clone Wars. As a veteran himself, someone who served with Jedi and clones alike, he knew when a pilot had the grit to become an ace. Realistically, Solo should have been an ace already, but Yularen rejected his papers because of Han's lack of discipline. If Solo could get that little thing under control, he could end up with one of the first 7 fleets, meaning he could serve with incredible Imperial admirals or moffs, perhaps even join Lord Vader or escort the Emperor. These were very highly coveted positions. Not only did they come with a natural increase in benefits and income, but authority of his own. Sure, Han could become a regular pilot and do just fine, but for someone with such exceptional talent, he had so little drive. Clearly, Kazi didn't realize that he was kind of driving Han Solo away from the Imperial Academy. Well, he would actually find out that he was, not fully, but during this conversation he would. In a discussion that would have originally sent Han to the planet of Minban as an Imperial trooper, not even a proper stormtrooper but a mud dog, he would be given a second chance. Lieutenant Kazi told Han that he'd have the opportunity to make things right with Imperial command. He even openly disclosed what Minban would have looked like for Han Solo. Kazi said that he didn't know if Han wanted out of the Imperial Navy or the military as a whole, but he had no choice until his contract came to a conclusion, which according to the records put Han out to another 2 years. Regardless, Kazi plopped a hologram down in front of Solo and it flipped open. Han's eyes registered what he saw. He had almost a guttural reaction. His face contorted and his hands gripped the chair. Kazi studied his star cadet and considered asking a question, but he didn't. Han Solo's heart on the other side of the table shattered into a million pieces. He promised the love of his life, Kira, that he'd come back for her. Instead, she had become blacklisted by the Empire for working with Dryden Voss and his criminal syndicate, Crimson Dawn. The hologram displayed her beside Dryden, and Han Solo sighed, letting his head drop for a moment. Kazi asked his pilot what was the matter, and Han's head raised. He looked at his lieutenant with a twist in his eyes. It was a look Kazi had never seen before. Han asked where he was going to go, and a data chip was handed to him. He was set to join his most recent class in a deployment exercise. Han grabbed the drive and stood up and walked out the door. He not only felt betrayed, but heartbroken. He promised Kira that he'd go back and save her, and instead, she joined one of the cruelest crime rings in the galaxy. Crimson Dawn was feared by almost every major non-Imperial group in the Outer Rim. The fact that she climbed the ladder to be so close to Dryden Voss spoke lengths to how little she trusted him. But one fact that Han didn't consider was where her heart and where her head were. She did love Solo, with almost all of her being, but she couldn't also just wait around for someone to save her. If she went back to Lady Proxima and served her, she'd probably end up dead. The underground of Corellia could be cruel and unforgiving, and that wouldn't be fair to Kira. She got herself out. Now Han was going in after her and the organization she served. Now, what Han Solo didn't understand about this mission, as he listened to briefings on the way to their deployment zone, was the extent of it. The Empire had many quiet deals with criminal organizations. It'd be very simple for the Imperial military to wipe out the Hutts, the Suns, or Crimson Dawn with the wipe of their hand. but that wouldn't be cost effective. The Empire took credits from the syndicates for not taking their territory. As Palpatine figured, galactic unity would cost credits, and it would damage the presence of Imperial pride. The Empire did better when there were poorer people to look down on. All of this goes to say that this mission was specifically a scare mission, not an actual attack. While Palpatine and the Senate had their own deals with the Outer Rim Devils, no one on the basic level knew about them. This included everyone from fleet admirals down to Imperial cadets. So the mission statement for this minor fleet was to push a Crimson Dawn fleet away from Imperial territory. If an engagement broke out, then all pilots were instructed to protect the fleet at all costs. That's it. It was a cheeky way of saying, don't destroy the pirate flagship because of the hidden deal between factions. Han Solo, though, felt a sense of urgency. In a state of confused betrayal, he felt that he needed to make a statement on behalf of the Empire. While his anger and brokenheartedness weren't fairly found, the rationale for this frustration was present. From Han's perspective, he had slaved away inside the ranks of the Imperial Navy for years, just to get back to Corellia to save her. Never did it cross his mind that Qi'ra might have escaped without his help, or that she'd be forced to move on just to simply survive. It was difficult for Han to come to this conclusion, so he didn't simply find it, and instead focused on the resolution he needed. This revenge from him wasn't necessarily directed at Qi'ra, more so Dryden Voss. He never wanted to hurt Qi'ra physically, or to kill her, but he did want her to feel the same hurt he felt in this very moment by killing Dryden. The Empire, though, only encouraged this radicalized behavior from its young men. It convinced them that they had been wronged by any number of things, and in order to right these wrongs, they needed to act out violently. Han was doing that, just as the Empire wanted, not on behalf of it or as a representative of the Emperor and so forth, but so that he could even the score with Dryden, taking him from Qi'ra. Little controlling. When the fleet arrived at a hyperspace with an Imperial 1 destroyer and 2 flanking acquaintances, Han's squad deployed first. Most of these were new recruits. Per Imperial standard battle practices, the Empire threw in freshly trained cadets to weed out the weak ones, while saving their more experienced pilots for more important battles, or simply just to live longer due to the disfavoring design of the TIE fighter. Han, though, followed behind the squad leader, as he ripped the engines forward just to rev it. The other pilots were a little uneasy at Han's movements. Because he wasn't going anywhere out of formation, he just continued to burst the engines, just for the shriek of the echo between cockpits. Crimson Dawn saw this attacking force and started to back away, but not without a fight. A squad of pirate interceptors moved towards the Empire. The Imperial squad leader blasted forward, giving his troops an attack pattern. Did Solo listen? Of course not. He weaved out of the way as a barrel of torpedoes deployed from one of the gunships. His TIE ducked below them, as 2 of his own wingmen were detonated for not responding immediately. As Han sped away, one of the torps trailed behind him, but with a hard twist of the control to the right, he began spinning. Everyone knows that's a good trick, and as his squad mates engaged the pirate bastards, the torp behind him exploded. Han cut back upwards and rolled his fingers along the trigger, before pressing down, unleashing a salvo of plasma into the underbellies of the pirate ships. Explosions rippled out, as the other TIEs were able to remain in formation and actually participate in the dogfights instead of, dying. Han kept his eye on the gunship that fired at him and trailed behind it. As he did, the Imperial destroyer started firing at the pirate flagship. The heavy pirate cruiser couldn't fire back due to being out of range, and with another shipment of Rhino from the surface making its way to the ship, another wing of fighters left the hangar bay to attack. These pirates followed behind Solo as he cut through one of the gunship's wings, sending into a fire explosion. Ahead of him, coming from the Star Destroyer, another grouping of TIEs were coming in for backup. Han's squad lead was preparing to send out a transmission to the rest of the squad from the flagship, but he was killed in an instant blast, leaving the other TIEs with no knowledge about the Rhino shipment. The Imperial fleet was out of range of a potential explosion, but it wasn't willing to test the explosive capabilities of Rhydonium, in the off chance their calculations were incorrect about the blast radius. Han, though, without knowing any of this, bounced back around and slipped between the incoming wing of pirate interceptors. The second wing of TIEs joined up with the original batch and the dogfight intensified, but Han Solo was bursting towards the pirate vessel. The ship had smoke billowing out of the top of it, and their cannons were inoperable, thanks to the Star Destroyer. The final Raido transport made its way towards the hangar bay, and Han focused in, holding the trigger carefully and firing everything he had into the side of the transport. The ship buckled, slipping up and then slamming down inside the hangar bay. Just as it entered, the pirate flagship started to depart into hyperspace, and just a split nanosecond after it jumped, the Raidonium exploded, sending out a huge burst of blue light into space, just a little less than a mile away from Han Solo. He rolled the TIE fighter back around, flipping all the toggles to favor speed over shields and firepower, and rushed back. His communication buzzed as he warned the other TIEs about the incoming explosion. The blue wave trailed right behind Solo's TIE fighter as he weaved between the wreckage field of the dogfight. Pirate interceptors, unaware of their abandonment, turned back into pure confusion, as they believed they routed the Imperial TIEs. They were only met with Han blasting past them by slipping between their ships and the beam of blue light from the detonation that would kill them. Solo continued pressing his ship as hard as possible. The other TIEs flipped into the Star Destroyer's hangar bay, and he, with only mere seconds to spare, cut the engines on his ship, rolled upwards entirely upside down, and shoved the throttle in. The ship kicked out a last push of energy, shoving him into the shielded hangars, as the Imperial Star Destroyer and its support ships tanked the explosion from the Raidonium. It was a triumphant victory for the Empire, no damage done to any of their vessels, aside from the fighters, but Solo had his own assortment of problems ahead of him. An ISB understudy, working with the fleet captain, was given permission to court-martial Cadet Han Solo for his reckless behavior. When Han got out of his TIE fighter, he was heralded as a hero. Everyone believed he was a straight-up badass. While disobeying orders was technically frowned upon, he also technically won a fleet engagement with a standard TIE fighter. That was a victory in everyone's eyes. As ISB understudy Blevin, with an Imperial Stormtrooper escort, took Han away, another one of the pilots from the 2nd Deployment Squadron rushed after them. Blevin could be heard to the trailing Imperial pilot as they walked down the corridors. Han was shoved into the ISB officer's office, and the troopers restrained him to a chair so he could be interrogated. The Imperial pilot that followed stopped outside the door and waited patiently to be let in, as Blevin demanded to know what the hell was that. Han looked smugly at the officer and told him he didn't know what he meant. It was explained by the ISB officer that the captain gave out specific orders to avoid an attack on the shipping vessel. Han cut off the ISB officer, which was a mistake in the first place, to explain he never received those orders. He was simply responding to the briefings from before. Their mission was to stop the hostiles. He didn't think that shooting down one singular shipping vessel would cause a massive explosion. The officer pouted his face confusedly and looked to the stormtroopers, demanding that they fetch another pilot from Han's squad to confirm this detail. They would get to the bottom of this. Before Blevin could get Solo to run down his entire plan and what exactly happened during the engagement, the pilot outside the door was brought in. The man introduced himself as Odie. He was a veteran pilot and was deployed with the 2nd TIE Squadron during the engagement. It very quickly would become known to Blevin that they weren't looking at a mutineer, rather technically a hero. Han Solo wasn't disobeying orders, which did fit his track record to actually disobey them, but instead he was trying to protect his squadmates, technically, who had already been blindsided by the second attack from the pirate fighter fleet. As Blevin worked through the file and spoke with Odie and Han about the engagement, he provided an official ISB signature, basically to prove that Han Solo was a beyond capable cadet, someone who did not disobey orders, just someone who didn't get them. The file went under Han Solo's pirate fleet in standard time. It was a little play on words, but it perfectly fit how Han could be perceived by other Imperial personnel. Blevin would also send a personal letter back to Lieutenant Kazi before leaving the minor fleet and returning to Coruscant for further training. Han Solo, on the other hand, had many new questions for his new friend Odie. This Imperial pilot had been with the Navy for years, coming into the Imperial fighter force fresh off of Kuat. He'd been in shipbuilding but pursued a better future with the military. He believed in the Empire. Han didn't, but he had been around it long enough to fake it. Odie called Solo the most capable pilot he'd ever seen and swore an oath to him that he'd serve beside him with honor as long as he continued to serve the Emperor and his empire. That was the irony of this weird mini-society that existed within Imperial ranks, at least military that is. Everyone was focused on their own goals for the collective government, but then there could very easily be a system of loyalty to a uniquely talented individual. Han Solo had already found himself a friend as he escaped the eternal hell of cadet life, and avoided what would have been a complete turnaround inside the ranks of the Imperial Army on Mimban. But to say that he found anything here satisfying or enjoyable would be wrong. Han was here for himself, not the grandeur of the Empire and not for anything else. No longer did he have a love to chase nor a person to save. This life was his own entirely, and he would live it so that he could survive and then thrive. Having Odie in his corner just gave him a sense of control. He could choose to break someone else, as he believed Kira had broken him. Or he could side if unity, brotherhood, and empire would become key attributes of his life. Individuals like Vader, Tarkin, and Palpatine may have not heard of Han's antics at the skirmish in the Outer Rim, but Imperial garrisons around the sector certainly did. Everyone knew TIE fighters were death traps. It was part of the role. The Empire funneled trillions of credits into his military, and the focus never really went to the fighters. So Han's actions gave troopers a little, very needed morale boost. For the men out on Mimban dying in the trenches, they saw this as an extra oomph to finish their campaign. It was widespread, near instantaneous effect. Han, without any knowledge of his actions or the inspiration it brought to the lower tier pilots, put his head down and started to work. With Odie in his corner, he felt his own first ounce of brotherhood within Imperial ranks. No longer concerning himself with abandoning the military, he tried to stabilize himself. Solo would not just bow down to the Imperial structure and become a know-it-all pilot with goody two-shoe traits. He was in this for himself, and even if he did have a new friend in Odie, it didn't mean he'd sacrifice himself for his buddy either. It'd be fair to say that Han Solo became a grittier pilot, a more disgruntled man, and a more focused Imperial. He served this machine for himself, for the future he believed he deserved. While it'd be easy for Solo to leave the military after his term expired, he decided on remaining. He became a useful tool for the Navy because his natural talents took him much further than most of his peers. This didn't even include the raw control he possessed over fighters after he actually refined his talents. Instead of fighting himself to leave the Empire, he put his head down, focused on killing everything that crossed in front of his blasters, and then he ascended. For 2.5 years, Han Solo's life revolved around the Empire. He didn't fall for its propaganda, he only did his duty. He was admired far and wide across the greater military complex. He was responsible for destroying subsections of rebel cells and cutting off supplies to movements that aided the growing rebellion. At this point, he excelled to the rank of ace pilot. He was a top-tier fighter that knew how to serve alongside some of the best. In briefings, he came across Lord Vader, Moff Tarkin, Admiral Thrawn, and Colonel Yularen. All of these were important faces to him, because they held the key to his success in life following the military. His reluctance to be a hero still sat within him, but that same theme of being a reluctant hero applied to his life in the military. Even though he held some semblance of command and a long chain up to the top, it really didn't matter to him. Most ace pilots received a trio of elite fighters to back them. At the bare minimum, they commanded a squad. And sure, one could say that Han technically commanded a squad. He didn't actually give them orders though. Everyone that served with Solo developed a more rebel-like attitude to the military structure. It wasn't anti-imperial, it was just focused on winning. The squad formation tactics disfavored Imperial pilots heavily. So for example, pilots like Odie, who might have died in small skirmishes to stay in formation against rebels or pilots, survived because he was operating in dogfights with concern for the objective and for himself. It does sound counterintuitive, but it worked in the way these pilots worked with Han. Not to mention that as his reputation grew within Imperial ranks, it also grew outside of them. Whenever he found himself in battle, he'd be forced to lead a train of trailing fighters, giving his co-pilots and squad mates a chance to pick off the other fighters. The Empire favored him so much that Colonel Yularen gave him a modified TIE interceptor, one equipped with shields. The vessel was still faster than the base TIE fighter, and it offered protection to one of the Empire's finest pilots. This perfect little ace pilot set the hope for the rebellion back nearly a decade. All the underground work still persisted without his interjection because Han in the end was only a pilot. But for those that needed to move between systems, they were the ones in trouble, and they faced it. Take for example Saw Gerrera, who had a decade-long alliance with Mothma and Organa by this point. He couldn't risk leaving his hidden bases because Solo would track down his Z-95 headhunters and wipe them out. And sure, it very easily could be said that Vader could do this job easier because of his affinity for the Force, but this, at this point, was considered well below his operational importance because it wasn't an actual alliance. Vader had to hunt down Jedi, deal with the Emperor's orders, not bands of rebels from Malastare or wherever. That's where Han came in, because while he didn't care about the fight for righteousness, he was a good hunter. If those around him provided him with a target, he would take it. Enfys Nest, which had a long-standing beef with Crimson Dawn for example, faced his wrath. Their entire band of marauders, which fed into a growing rebellion, were wiped off the map by an aerial assault led by Solo. This was common for him and his unit, and the best part for Han was how little work he actually needed to do. It wasn't exactly uncommon for a ranked Imperial to pass their work off to underlings, but Solo got away with far more than anyone else. He was a guy's guy. He bantered with the crew, made friends easily, didn't like any of them, and kept enough of a cocky demeanor to make himself hateable but in the right way. And the women? Don't get him started. Probably a good number of the men that served with him wanted to be like him, and they didn't mind his less than attentive leadership. No one got away with anything like Solo did, until of course, he flew a little too close to the sun. After consistently being one of the best pilots in the Imperial Navy for almost 3 years, Han lost a battle. In that moment, all of his unregulated tactics became a topic of discussion. All of his success, the pirates he wiped out, the rebel movements he crushed, all of it became use for scrutiny. And while he didn't face direct punishment, he faced the wrath of the chain of command, by being placed under the no-funny businessman himself, Moff Tarkin. As second-hand Imperial, excluding Vader, to Palpatine, Tarkin had the reins of the Empire in his hands. He was politically as high as anyone could be, liked within the military and feared by everyone. His decision to bring Han into his ranks was also a political move. While he didn't have any plans to usurp Palpatine, he needed to maintain his popularity, and putting someone like Solo in the spotlight inside the Galactic Core would retain that. The actual punishment for Solo was being forced to interact with Tarkin across various galas and Imperial upper-class events. Being that he was still the rat from Corellia, he didn't have the table manners of the typical Imperial Academy graduate. But despite how little Tarkin cared for his lack of demeanor, Han was still popular. It was almost hard to deny how popular Solo was. He may have lost his position in the Outer Rim and brought into Tarkin's grips, but it was almost like a promotion. He never saw the benefits of it personally, aside from the residence he had in one of Coruscant's high rises. This forced separation from Odie and the boys he grew accustomed to in the Outer Rim meant that Han had to show off his abilities in front of ISB officers and the likes of top-tier Grand Admirals in the Empire. His success was unlike anything else they had seen because he did his job. Most Imperials like to play the long game, to make their enemies fear the power of the Empire before they try and swoop in. Han came from down below. He understood the fight or flight of the rebels. They'd pounce and run away if Imperial Star Destroyers showed themselves, but if TIE Fighters appeared, they could believe in a chance for victory against them. Within the first few weeks of his stay on Coruscant, where Tarkin demanded that Solo prove himself, he impressed all of his colleagues, across the board. Again, it should be reiterated that they didn't like his slang or his demeanor. He wasn't an upper-class Imperial, but as Tarkin and even the Emperor himself highlighted, words meant nothing if there weren't results to override them. Basically saying Palpatine didn't really care how Han acted. As long as he delivered, he could really do whatever he wanted. And Solo brought a challenge to the table that no other Imperial graduate could. Success. Yeah, Imperial troopers, Imperial fleets, they all won, and they rarely lost. They weren't completing the job though. Other ace pilots feared standing up to the process of the Imperial military. Han had only one thing he cared about. Aside from spending his credits at clubs and on women, he had the high-rise apartment gifted to him by Tarkin. That's all he cared about. That apartment was proof that he had made it, and if he lost that, then that'd also be proof that his success was superficial. However, even though he feared the idea of losing that home, he told every single officer how he really felt. He described to them why they continued to lose, even though they weren't losing battles. Imperial fleets were massive. No right-in-the-head rebel would dare challenge a destroyer, let alone 3 of them, or 4 of them, or 5 of them. It encouraged behind closed doors behavior. If the Empire was everywhere and physically present, then where would the rebels go? Not away, but into secrecy. If the Empire, though, used quiet tactics, deploying highly trained commandos or pilots, then they could expose weak rebel groups. All of these rebels were looking for a morale boost. It was not a unified rebellion. They were cells, and the Empire was treating them like they had more to offer than a couple of random people with blasters. Han simply offered a chance to look at the rebels as what they were, rats. You don't bring in tanks or star destroyers to snuff out a simple infestation. Nay, you bring in just a small trap, just a little poison, enough to kill the threat, not eviscerate the home with it. Despite Han's sentiment challenging the very process of Imperial authority, and even directly challenging the Emperor's policy positions themselves, it was upheld. Palpatine looked at the broad picture. He saw the Senate, the grand military, the machine as a whole. Han saw just a smaller picture, something that Sidious might have seen if he weren't Emperor. It offered just a different perspective that the Empire wouldn't have gotten. Sure, it's easy to say that any runt like Solo could find themselves in these meetings if they tried hard enough, but it's not as easy to say that those said runts wouldn't try brown-nosing. Han Solo wasn't here for accolades. He didn't care what anyone thought of him. He spoke his mind, something that many Imperials wouldn't do unless they held the cards in their hands to do so. They certainly wouldn't challenge known Palpatine positions, but Han didn't care. Not to mention, he also didn't really know about what Palpatine thought about Imperial authority, so that helped his case too. In the months following Han's arrival to Coruscant with Moff Tarkin, the Empire implemented the very strategies he suggested. The analogy of hunting a mouse with poison or a few traps really spoke to the top Imperial officers, and it worked. Not to say that it immediately brought Saw Gerrera into their hands, but it gave the rebels a false sense of security. When divisions of stormtroopers pulled away, when daunting Imperial flagships left the atmosphere, when the presence of their brittle authority vanished, it created a gap. Room for the rebels, people that hated the Empire, to show their true colors. Whether it be rebels getting too carried away and starting block fires that consumed entire portions of a given community, or starting riots with local enforcement, it didn't matter. The false security that the Empire wasn't there put the rebels out into the open and provided the ISB specifically an avenue into their ranks. The few lines of connection between cells could be exposed and utilized. As a result, slowly but surely, the hope for an actual rebellion died. Yet, it should be said that even though the Rebel Alliance would never be born from Gerrera, Mothma, or Bail Organa, it was not the worst thing ever. Han Solo may have not changed what the Empire was, but he did indirectly create the butterfly effect that protected Alderaan from the Death Star. There would be no battle over Scarif, nor one at Yavin. The Empire grew and only continued to do so after Solo retired from the Navy, but in its growth, there was even more overconfidence. In the era of the Death Star and the TIE Defender, where planets from Lothal to Ferrix to Jedha remained under Imperial occupation, there was new hope. Without Alderaan or Scarif, Luke Skywalker could train with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda without interruption. In the disbandment of the Imperial Senate, Bail could teach Leia how to be the face of a rebel movement by learning from his failures. Individuals like Luthen Rael might burn for someone else's sunrise, but that burn did not come yet. Only the embers spread. The dying fire that the Empire blew out thanks to Han Solo did not destroy the rebellion. It gave it more time to develop, in ways that the Empire couldn't prepare for. Solo's retirement would see him marrying an Imperial aristocrat, a powerful face from Hosnian Prime, but someone who also understood how political sways worked. Han didn't create a stronger empire. He only gave it more time to wear out his welcome. Once 2 Death Stars were finished completion, with Superstar Dreadnought Star Destroyers and TIE Defenders, people started to realize it would never end. The galactic surveillance that they had to deal with would forever grow worse, and so Han unintentionally turned a fledgling bundle of rebel cells into an anti-imperial movement galaxy-wide. Because he didn't care about the Empire, he didn't run to the front lines to protect it when war came during his mid-50s. His old buddy Odie did, and he died believing in the glory of the Empire. The prolonged decades of Imperial rule made it weak, easier to disassemble, and made it nearly impossible for even die-hard loyalists to try and rebuild it. The war itself wouldn't even see either Death Star destroyed. There'd be some planets hit with single ignition reactors, but overall the brainwashing that worked on post-Clone War children didn't last for multiple generations, on a widespread level that is. Without the rebellion seemingly present for years after the Clone Wars and being dealt with in its early stages thanks to Han Solo, people didn't fear anything except the Empire. It continued growing, and to people, they didn't know why that was happening if there was no existential threat. When the smoke cleared of civil war, Han and his small family of 4 stayed away from the rebuilding process on Coruscant. They went to his wife's home world on Hosnian Prime, and watched the leader of the Rebel Alliance, General Leia Organa that is, lead the New Republic into a new stage of democracy. With Bail Organa and Mon Mothma behind her, she was unstoppable. The new Jedi Order led by Luke Skywalker made headlines, as it brought peace to locations Han had left barren during his time as an Imperial pilot. Kenobi remained by Luke's side throughout all of it. While the destruction of the Sith remained a mystery to the galaxy, because no one knew about it, the rumor would forever be that the new Jedi Order brought balance to the Force. At least, that was the message Han Solo heard one day, when a blind man from Jeddah tried to convince him that he had a far greater purpose in the changing winds of the Force. Solo did not believe in hokey religions, only a good blaster, and he kept it that way, living a peaceful life, while his should-have-been friends completely reunified the galaxy, rebuilt a republic and the Jedi Order, while also changing the fates of every soul that called the galaxy home. And that, my friends, is our story. Special thanks to all the patrons. Smash the like button. Hey guys, it's been a hot minute. Sorry. So life happened. That was pretty stressful. Anyways, should be back now. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Kind of got sick. Kind of did a move. It was a whole thing. But I'm here. I'm back. We're good. We're chilling. Okay, we're all chilling. All right. I do appreciate you guys for checking on me. You guys are the best. I love you guys to death. You guys are the best in the world. Seriously, I love you guys so much. Anyways, I'm going to talk about the story now. The story, I really like the idea of being based on the concept of the butterfly effect. I really wanted this to be the ultimate butterfly effect, and I wanted it to kind of be almost a neutral ending, or come off as neutral. I've been sitting on this idea for a while, and I've not really figured it out until I started writing it recently, that this is the direction I wanted to go with it. Putting Han in the Imperial Academy theoretically shouldn't change anything, right? Technically him not leaving shouldn't change anything except for that one thing with Enfys Nest and the Rhydonium. But that's also kind of why this story works as a butterfly effect. It is the ultimate butterfly effect, is that him seeing Kira with Dryden Voss and misinterpreting that terribly is kind of what sends him down this path of restructuring the Empire. I think Han is up there with some of the best non-force sensitive pilots in the galaxy. Han, Syndulla, Dameron. I think those are the top people, top pilots in the galaxy, non-force sensitive. And so it makes sense for Han to kind of continue his rogue element and be like a rogue force inside the Imperial military, but also be productive at it. And I think that strategy of not really showing, but doing, would actually work well against the Alliance. I've tried this in several iterations with, these pro-Empire quote-unquote videos, but I really thought this one would work well if Han was the catalyst for it, and he's only doing it, and all of this really happens because of him being himself. I think he wouldn't really work inside the Imperial military, but he'd probably enjoy it because, he'd be able to, go to all the military bars and pick up girls, and he'd have a great time with that. And so that's kind of why it's also a part of the story that he's doing that, is that I feel like he would thrive in the more social aspect, while people would look up to him, people would see him as this great guy, and he's really not. He's just kind of a dick and gets away with it because it's Harrison Ford. I mean, it kind of makes sense. So, you know, that's the entire 80s basically. So, you know, he's just kind of doing whatever he wants and getting away with it. And that kind of accidentally applies to Palpatine. Like, he kind of uses his little thing on Palpatine, and he's like, yeah, you know what, this guy's kind of cooking. And I thought it'd be kind of cool if the rebellion didn't die, because it never would technically die, I don't think, but just got kind of pushed back a couple decades. So the Imperial Senate's disbanded for like 20 years, and then the war happens, and then they lose, and then obviously the New Republic is rebuilt without all those people from the previous empire kind of filling in the Senate seats. So I hope you all enjoyed this story. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.